guys, my name is JK Denim and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a 3D dragon cake. Now this cute little dragon is primarily made of buttercream, but I did use fondant to create some of his features like his scales and his hands. I love the texture of buttercream, I love the way that this came out, so let's get started. To create this cake, the first thing I did was build my cake structure. I drilled a hole into my cake board and then I hot glue gunned a PVC pipe into the middle. Once the hot glue hardened, it was time to start stacking my cake. Now for this dragon cake, I'm using 2 egg-shaped cakes that I baked in egg pans, 2 6-inch round cakes, and a 6-inch half dome cake. First thing I did was level off each of my cakes, and I leveled most of them in the pan, except for the egg-shaped cake. I leveled those on my cutting board. And once I finished leveling all of my cakes, it was time to start stacking. Now to start, I'm using my 6-inch round cake to be the bottom of my dragon. And I'm going to add some buttercream on top and then place on my 6-inch half dome cake. Now this is going to be the dragon's body. Now for my dragon head, I'm going to need a little support. And I took my pipe cutter and then I just cut away the top of a pipe coupler. I placed it on top of my PVC pipe and just hammered it into place with my offset spatula. You don't want to like force it down with your hands because it could go into the cake. So just very lightly tap it into place. Now I added a small piece of cardboard to sit around my coupler. And then I added my first egg-shaped cake. Now to give this bottom egg a little bit more stability, I added some buttercream and then added another coupler for support. Now I'm placing on a larger piece of cardboard. Then I cut my PVC pipe so that it doesn't go above my dragon's head. I'm going to surround it with some buttercream and then add on my second egg shape. I gave this baby a crumb coat and then I placed it into the fridge to set for about 2 hours. I just needed it to set up before I started carving it. And while I was in the fridge, I was watching some daytime television and I was watching The View. I love The View. Who's on it? It's like Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Joy Behar, Sunny Austin, and Megan McCain, right? Oh, I love those 5. This is where I get most of my news from. I have a very serious question to ask you guys. Whenever you're watching a television show with a live audience, do you clap when the audience claps? I always clap like when they come back from commercial breaks or like when they introduce a guest. Am I the only one that does it? I'm probably the only one that does it. Anyways, let's get back to the cake. I started to carve my dragon shape. To create my dragon shape, the first thing I did was carve my dragon head. And I just shaved away at the side of it so that it was less rounded. I did the exact same thing with the back. Now I wanted my dragon to have like a narrower snout, so I just shaved away at the sides until I was happy with the way it looked. Once I was happy with its head, I moved on to carving away at its body. First, I started to shave away at the cake and create my dragon's neck. And I wanted to make sure I separated my dragon legs from the rest of its body. I just wanted to make sure that his legs look separate from the rest of his body and his tummy. So I just used a small paring knife to create that separation. For the second 6-inch cake, it was kind of a waste. I used it for my dragon tail and I didn't end up needing that much of the cake. I attached it to the back with a little bit of buttercream and then just shaved a little bit of cake at a time. Once I was happy with my dragon, I gave it another crumb coat. I know the first crumb coat was kind of a waste, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't dry out while it was in the fridge, because sometimes I say that I'm gonna watch like 30 minutes of TV and then it's like I'm 6 hours deep into a Netflix show and it just, now my cake is dry. I love putting on the crumb coat though because it's so soothing. I like cleaning and this is like the cake cleaning. You're just taking all the crumbs and making sure that it looks clean and they don't appear on the final layer of cake. It's beautiful. I placed this back into the fridge for about an hour. And after my cake was set up, I started to add my second and final layer of buttercream. Green buttercream. I covered my entire dragon from head to toe. And the color of green, I thought it was really funny. It looks like guacamole. The whole time I was covering it, I was singing the guacamole song. Guacamole, guacamole. Do you guys know that song? Someone should remix that and put a bass drum underneath. And it'll be fire. Guacamole, guacamole. After I finished covering my entire dragon, I placed it back into the fridge again, for about 30 minutes. To create the look that I'm going for, I need the buttercream to be hard. So I let it sit in the fridge for a little bit to solidify, then I take it out and I start refining all of my edges. I actually really like this part too because it's like I'm creating a butter sculpture. I love the texture of buttercream, and because there is a lot of texture, I'm not trying to get the surface of the cake completely smooth. I'm just refining all of my edges and making sure that you can see all of the things that I carved early on. If you want to see more of my buttercream creations, I have this llama cake that I created here. His name is Peter. Look how fantastic he looks. Speaking of names, we need to give this dragon a name. It looks like a Puff. Puff the magic dragon. Now once I was happy with my dragon's body, I placed it back into the fridge and I started to create all of his details. Now all of these details I'm doing with fondant because it's super easy. I rolled 6 different little tiny green balls together to create 6 toes. And then I rolled some fondant into a long tube and just created a separation at his wrist so you could tell where his arms and his hands were. To create my dragon claws, I rolled some white fondant into a teardrop shape. And then I attached the smaller ones to his hands and the larger ones to his toes with a little bit of magic sauce or vodka or water. I don't know, you do you. I set those aside and I started to work on my dragon scales, or like, are they scales? They are, right? They're like scale plates that go on this side of the head. Yeah, that's right. And I rolled out some red fondant and then using a pizza cutter, I just cut out a diamond shape. I cut the bottom part of it off to create sort of like it's like a triangle. It is a triangle. It's a wavy triangle. I'm using a silicone impression mat to create my dragon scales texture. I just placed it in, pressed down, and then repeated that process over and over and over again with different size pieces of fondant. I even made a few extra because I wanted to make sure that I had enough for his entire body. Now to make these scales stand up, I just inserted toothpicks into the middle of each scale so I could plunge the toothpick into the dragon cake. Now I let these scales set for about 2 hours so that they would get hard and they wouldn't flop over when I place them on my dragon. Now this dragon has a lot of components, and the next thing I had to create were dragon wings. Now to create my dragon wings, I rolled out some yellow fondant and then using a pizza cutter, I just cut out the dragon wing shape. It's the same shape that I create when I create bats. I'm using some sculpting tools to create some texture, and then I inserted a dowel into one side of the wing so I could plunge the dowel into my dragon. Using the first wing as a guide, I created the second wing and I just placed them up against a cookie cutter so that they wouldn't be flat on my board. I'm gonna use the same yellow color to create some spots for my dragon as well. Now we have one more thing to create, my dragon eyes. To create my dragon eyes, I started off with 2 large circles of navy blue fondant that I cut out with a cookie cutter. I'm cutting out a smaller circle with a lighter shade of blue to create some highlights for his eyes. And then I used some white fondant to create some catch lights. 2 large ones and 2 smaller ones. I'm going to attach the eye highlight to the bottom of the eye and then place the larger catch light on top of it. For the right eye, the smaller catch light goes on the left, and for the left eye, the smaller catch light goes on the right. The 2 catch lights make his eyes look like they're sparkling more. It looks dope. So I took my cake out of the fridge. The first things I added were my dragon toes as well as my dragon's arms. I pressed his toes up against the dragon legs and then pressed his hands up against the side of his body. Now whenever you work with buttercream, it's like the top layer of buttercream gets darker. So when you're sculpting the cake, you're working with 2 different colors of buttercream. The top layer, which is dark, and the bottom layer, which is still like kind of light. And I wanted the arms and the toes to match, so I kind of like painted on some buttercream to make it look like they were a part of the cake. Now after his arms and his toes, I added on some spots. I just cut some yellow fondant into some rounded shapes and then placed different sizes on his body. I added on my dragon eyes and I placed on some spots behind them to mimic the characteristics of some anime characters. A lot of cute anime characters have this and it makes them look so cute. And to create my dragon's mouth, I'm using a long black rope of fondant that I created with this baby. It's a fondant extruder or clay extruder. I call it the crank. The crankin'. I gave him 2 teeth as well because I thought it'd make him look more fierce. And my dragon needed a nose, so I just used a dowel and poked 2 holes into his snout. Then I started adding on all of my dragon scales. This is one of my favorite parts of this cake because it looks so plain, and then you add the scales and it's like, wow, this looks so fierce. I placed my scales on a slope, so it's small, then it gets progressively bigger, then it goes down to back to small, and then it gets progressively bigger, and then it goes down, 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 down again, like that. That's a technique I use. I use the small and gets a little bit bigger, and then it gets small again, and then it gets a little bit bigger, and then it goes back to the being very small. Technique. I use that technique. It's looking sick, right? Okay, we're almost done. Now, I didn't want my dragon to be just like chilling on a cake board. I wanted him to be like fire breathing. So I decided to take some coconut shavings and I diluted a little bit of black food coloring with some vodka and just shook it until it was a nice gray. Then I scattered them all around my dragon because I was like, this is like the ashes of all the enemies he charred. Yo, because this guy looks so cute, but he will mess you up. Finally, I added in my dragon wings and voila! Puff, the fire-breathing, magical blue-eyed dragon was complete. He looks like a watermelon dragon, doesn't he? I just needed to make the red just like pink scales, and that would he looks just like a watermelon dragon. I love making cakes with buttercream. I think they're so much easier than when you make a cake with fondant, because when you make a cake with fondant, if you screw up underneath, then you're kind of just stuck. But if you screw up with buttercream, just slice it off and then just go on with your bad self. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments what animal or like mythical animal that you'd like to see me create next. I love you. I will see you very soon. Peace!